Well, they canceled the shit out of that apocalypse. Pacific Rim is the much anticipated Robots vs. Monsters movie from Guillermo del Toro, the live action anime that has been heating up the trailer circuit all leading up to the summer blockbuster season. The hero of Pacific Rim is played by Charlie Hunnam, the main character from Sons of Anarchy, who incidentally is one of many British actors playing an American on American TV. That seems to be a trend right now. Now, I happen to like Charlie Hunnam in this movie a lot more than a lot of other reviewers seem to have. Possibly because I watched all of their reviews before I went to see the movie myself, and I wasn't expecting that much from him, and certainly got a whole lot more than I expected. I thought he was pretty good. I thought he was likable. I didn't think he particularly rose above other similar heroes in similar movies, but I thought he did a more than credible job in this particular role. Idris Elba plays the Marshal, the person in overall command of the Jaeger program, the Jaegers being the giant robots. Idris Elba is great in virtually everything he's ever been in. Idris Elba was Stringer Bell from The Wire. He's Luther in the British detective show Luther. He's the guy that was guarding the bridge in Thor. Idris Elba's been all over the place, and every place he's been, he's turned in a fantastic performance, and this is certainly no disappointment. And there are a couple of characters that are in there, primarily for comic relief. The two scientists are, while they're integral to the plot, they're mainly there to give you a laugh. Ron Perlman's character is mainly there to give you a laugh. They succeed. I did laugh at their parts. I laughed at all the funny bits. But I do agree with a lot of the reviewers that the two scientists could have been toned down just a little bit. They didn't need to be quite that zany. Same thing could be said of Ron Perlman's character, but they didn't annoy me quite as much as they seem to annoy other people. The villains in the film are the giant monsters called Kaiji, named after and inspired by the giant monsters of traditional Japanese monster films like Godzilla, Rodan, Gamera, and it's very clear in the design that these creatures are meant to remind you of them, and they do it quite well. Charlie Hunnam's character, Riley Beckett, is a retired Jaeger pilot who's retired from the Jaeger program after a tragic event. The main story begins as the Jaeger program is failing. The world is on the brink of destruction, and all Jaeger pilots are needed, and Riley is called back in. At this point, the main story begins. Charlie Hunnam's character, Riley, before he can climb back into his Jaeger, must find the perfect co-pilot. It's an interesting little subplot involving the fact that since the Jaegers are piloted by the mind, and they're piloted by two people, the two pilots have to sort of mind meld almost, and it's a neat little thing involving either shared memories or integrating memories. And while piloting, the two minds are acting as one. Therefore, compatibility is paramount. And much of the film involves finding that perfect pilot. And it's actually pretty cool. It's fairly entertaining. In comes Rinko Kachuki as that co-pilot and Charlie Hunnam's staunchest ally in the Jaeger program. On the upside, the action is huge, literally. While the special effects didn't wow me quite as much as I thought they would, I think that's more a symptom of having seen reviews by people who were wowed by the special effects and having my expectations raised. There's certainly no point watching this film where you will think that looks fake, other than the fact that you realize that giant robots and giant monsters don't exist. But the special effects convey the action in a manner that is much clearer, much more intelligible than anything you've seen in any Transformers film. The action is not as frenetic, there's not as much stuff flying at you. It's just, okay, here's two really, really big things having a fight. And that was very exciting. They gave you a very good idea of what it would really look like if two things that big smashed their way through a city. Earth is being devastated by these things, and that devastation is absolutely displayed on film. Wow. Personally, I enjoyed all of the performances in this film much more than I expected to. Again, possibly due to lowered expectations from having watched other reviews. I certainly thought every actor in the film carried their role at least as well as necessary. Quite a few of them went above and beyond the call of duty. Idris Elba, as always, was a standout. He's probably going to be your favorite actor and favorite character in almost everything he does. And so I did like Charlie Hunnam more than I expected to. Rinka Kachuki was enjoyable as well. So yeah, the acting was on the upside. And while most reviewers will tell you that the downside of this movie is the plot, that said, the plot isn't as bad as you expect it to be, given that that is the downside. It is a much better plot than I expected. And while many of the characters don't stand out as much as they could have, they largely weren't meant to. It might have been more interesting if they had. There's some Russian characters that look interesting that have very few lines. There's the three Chinese characters that pilot the Chinese Jaeger, Red Typhoon. It would have been interesting to learn more about them. Literally, the film focuses on the two English-speaking Jaeger teams, and it kind of would have been interesting if you got to know a little bit more about the other Jaeger pilots. Other than that, I think that's probably the only downside. Those two things. And the review. For me, this was a 4-star movie. Could it have been a 5-star movie? Yeah. Yeah, there's enough there that done right, this movie could have been 5 stars. It didn't disappoint me. It didn't feel like it missed too many opportunities, but it also didn't reach for enough. It went for just enough emotion so that you could say they did it. It got the action right. It focused on the action. It went for just enough with the characters and exploring the characters so you could say they did it, but it didn't explore every character, like I said. And they went for the humor a little bit too hard. That's the thing, that they could have just done enough to say that they did it, and they went a little too far. So the film settles out at 4 stars. It had enough to be 5 and didn't quite make it, but given how hard they went after what they went after, and how lightly they ignored the things that they could have gone after, this movie could have easily dropped to 3 or 2. and it didn't. And that's probably due to the director, Guillermo del Toro. So, 4 stars, and we're lucky we got 4 stars out of this thing, because it is an awesome movie. You're going to want to see it. You're going to want to see it on the big screen. Pacific Rim, 4 stars. Now, there was a point when Guillermo del Toro was going to direct The Hobbit, and Peter Jackson was going to direct the live-action version of an anime called Evangelion. Now, what's Evangelion about? Well, Evangelion is about giant robots versus giant monsters, kinda like Pacific Rim. Now, if you've seen Evangelion, it's one of the more polarizing anime out there, largely due to the way it ended. I feel a lot of people, myself particularly, are glad it worked out the way it worked out. I think Pacific Rim is certainly better than any live-action version of Evangelion could have been. But what about you? Are you familiar with both? Did you see Evangelion? What did you think of the ending? Would you have rather seen Peter Jackson's Evangelion? Would you have rather seen Guillermo del Toro's Hobbit? What do you think? Let me know.